So I love thinking about art. Like, I love philosophizing about it and, thinking about it all day and trying to get, like, a point out, something a little bit past, I like this or I don't like this. I love doing that. It's, like, my favorite thing ever to do. There's an element of this, though, this, like, thing I love doing, of thinking about art, that is always going to have a gap in it. And that's that, like, I don't think this is a radical position to take at all, that there is, like, a deeply intuitive element to art. You can think your way through everything all day, and oftentimes, in my experience at least, thinking about these things leaves you more confused about your own opinions on art than actually coming to conclusions. But you can think about it all day, but no matter what, you can't, at least I guess with our current level of technology or whatever, think through intuition. You'll never be able to replace that element of art. It's honestly one of the reasons why I love thinking about art, when you go back in time to, like, earlier people that, I don't know, I feel like saying, like, earlier philosophers makes it sound like I think I'm a philosopher, which I don't at all. But I think, like, when you go back in time, the window of things you could kind of just ponder and think about was much more open. And that's, kind of a time I think a lot of us yearn for, as things are so explained by science now. I think, like, I know I personally have a great desire to just, like, sit down and think my way through something I'm just passionate about, and that's why I love the field of art, because there is that element of intuition. There's that element of, like, well, you can't really know, and I find that to be awesome. But because of that, I think that it also has the effect of, like, the good part about you'll never really know is you get to think of a lot of answers. The bad part about it is you'll never know which one's the right answer. None of this is groundbreaking, I know. But it's a serious gap in, well, honestly, anything I could ever say. I could come up with the greatest theory of how art works ever, but there's always going to be that gap in it. And I want to talk about today, give credence to intuition a little bit. Because, I, as much as every time I come here and talk to you guys, I try to accent my conversation that I'm having with all of you of, like, I don't think this is the right answer. I just think, I'm just thinking about this. There's an element I'll never know, I try to accent that. I do also think that I don't give enough time of day just thinking about how insane intuition is in art, I think that's why so often, like, we look back at art and it has this almost, like, prophetic way of predicting the future, because I think what art does that's so good is it speaks to the struggles of like a time, or just people in general. I think, that's what I think art's so good at, right? Is it can tap into, like, the universal humanity in all of us. And, like, I think it almost, I guess to try and put this a little more eloquently than I am, I think it almost has a currency of empathy within art, right? Like a necessary one, or I don't know if you can separate art from empathy in a regard. I think that obviously there is art that has a serious lack of empathy in comparison to others, right? There's some that has much more emotion put into it. I don't think anybody's going to argue that the last Apple commercial was as empathetic as, the last poem that made you cry. But even in that, there's still empathy necessary, right? I don't think you can really create without empathy. I'm not going to say that definitively, because I haven't really thought about that before right now saying it. But, like, even in that Apple commercial, to make a successful commercial, you need the empathy of what kind of person wants an iPhone. Can we get into their head a little bit? Can we think about what they like? That's empathy being exercised. It's empathy to sell someone something, not to connect with them on a human level, but empathy nonetheless, But I think what this empathy does so well is it makes us kind of see how similar we all are to each other. I think that's great. You'll oftentimes see, there'll be a movie about a war-torn country, and maybe my friends will have watched or something, and they'll always tell me that, like, it's relatable, or it's moving, or it touches them in a way that they find relatable, you know, or that they can also kind of tap into the emotions in it, despite the fact that, like, I don't know anybody from a war-torn country. You know, all my friends are first world middle-class people just like myself. And I think that, on the one hand, I do get why some people are like, that leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths. But, you know, outside of a conversation about that, I also think that's great that's a great example that speaks to just how much art can do that. Art has that ability to show us all, look how similar you all are, you know? And I think it helps us, it reminds us of the humanity in each other. You know, something I've toyed with, an idea that I've kind of toyed with a good amount, that might be a little bit out there, but, you know, why not? Is like, I've talked about this before on Paint and Talk, how the world around us, the systems we're in, all these things are like so complicated that it's impossible to fully understand them. I've talked about it specifically in reference to, I did that one episode about, like, I was talking about the elephant story of all the blind people. I'll reiterate it here just because why not? It's been a minute, I think. You know, the elephant comes into the town of blind people. A king brings this elephant in, and all the blind people run up to it, and they're feeling a part of the elephant, going, you know, oh, it's the creature has a long trunk, or the creature has this sturdy leg, and they all think they know what the elephant feels like, despite only feeling one part of it. In this episode of Paint Talk, caveated that, saying, I think that story lacks another element to the fact that they could all feel that there is more to the elephant, as much as they might not say it explicitly, as much as they might feign understanding, they can feel that there is a larger thing at play, being this whole elephant. And I think this is, I didn't come up with this, this is a very famous example of how the world around us works. You know, we've all met that guy. Usually he's a older white guy in a bar, I think, is a pretty good. Sometimes he has like a baseball cap on, I think, and a little bit of facial hair, is the guy I'm thinking of right now. And he always tells you, you know, I know how the world works. He'll be like, people are either, you know, he'll have something he has to say of like, it's a bitch or be bitch world and you gotta be a bitch. That's all I got. Or he'll go, there's two types of people. People that change the world around them, or people that get changed by the world around them. Or he'll go like, you know, everybody's greedy and out for themselves, so you gotta be out for yourself. You know, like, it's always this guy, right? I'm gonna go on a limb and say this isn't just like a thing that I've experienced in my life. We've all met this guy. Oftentimes he'll be recently divorced. That's a big thing too for this guy. Very, like, perpetually divorced, you know what I mean? I think it's almost like a universal role of a guy who gets divorced and goes to a bar, and that guy has to sit in the bar till the next guy gets divorced and he has to go in there. Jokes aside though, we've all met a guy like this, whether he's in this bar and recently divorced, or he is somebody who you just know, who thinks they have the world figured out, right? This person will always act as if they'll do the same thing as the blind people in this story. You know, they'll go, I get how this works, but even they know that their ideas are a simplification. They're recently divorced, they probably won't say it, but they understand that, right? I think that art is, you know, when art does something really great, when art really gets to show us something we didn't know before, I think that's what it's so good at. It's tapping into that feeling of there is something much larger behind us. And I might not be able to say it because, you know, let's take society for an example, right? I feel like I've said that word a million times in this Paint and Talk. But the idea, the concept of society, I don't think you could ever explain that in words. Like, I mean, like, I don't think you could literally lay out all of society and get it right. You know, maybe I'm wrong. I think you could lay out elements of society. I mean, there are so many texts on how morality works, or you know, government, or economics. Like, all these things can be laid out, but I don't think it's actually possible to come together and go like, okay, this is society in a book. I don't think that's possible. Maybe one day I'll be proven wrong, and that'd be insane. I mean, that'd be obviously a great feat for humanity if we could do that, but I think that's probably really hard, right? Because you can't, to lay out the bigger picture of society and every little component of it, you would have to tap into the emotions of it. You'd have to tap into the way that these things connect that you might not be able to see. You know, the famous quote, the sum of the parts is never the same as its whole. When you lay out economics and politics and philosophy and religion and morality and all these things, you can say, you know, the economics affect the politics, it affects the morality, and the religion affects the morality. You can say that all you want. Very true. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody will argue with you. But no matter what, when you make these things happen, when society all comes together and folds in on itself, there's like more to it. There has to be, because the way these things connect will never be the same as just them apart. And I think that a painting explains that better than a book ever could. And I'm not saying a painting in general. I'm saying art. You know, I think a movie explains it better. I think a poem explains it better. I think that the only way to truly get across the, you know, sort of the larger scheme of things that we can all feel looming over our lives in many regards, I think the only way to truly get that across is by making it abstract. I think it'd be a fruitless effort to try and do it any other way. And I think that's what art is so great at. And I think that's what intuition does so well within art. I think it's so great at taking this abstract form of society that we all can feel, that we are all familiar with in one way or another, and making us and putting it in our face, going, see, this is what you're feeling. And that's why I think it's almost mystical. That's why I think it's almost magical. Not to make a Benson Boone reference, because he has that song out right now, but that's why I think it works so well, because nothing else is capable of doing that in the way that intuition is. I don't think you could calculate that. You know, like, as much as I can sit here and think about that, right, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, huge chance either way, you know what I mean? I'm just some guy talking in a cube right now and uploading it to youtube.com, but even, let's say I'm right, for argument's sake. I hope I am, that'd be cool. I don't think you could calculate it even. You know, let's say you're an artist watching this being like, I think this guy just hit the nail on the head. I don't think you could actually go and be like, I'm going to put the contradictions in society into my work. Because I think that you need to actually just feel them and put that in there. You know? A poem about losing your father, or, you know, your mother, or a family member, or somebody you hold dear, will be able to tell you way more about society than a book ever could on economics, because society is felt, not thought, you know? And that's why I think some art feels alive. This is the painting. I completely failed on what I wanted to do again. I like the background on this a lot more. I'm trying to think of what it reminds me of. It reminds me of something that I really like, but I like the background. I am not nailing the uncanny feeling on the eyes. There's something that feels uneasy about that, and I like that. I like this painting a lot more than yesterday's. And I honestly do think that this deconstruction series is so cool. I'm enjoying these, but this isn't what I want to do. I want to nail that feeling of unease, not because of the way the eyes look, not because of the way the head's turned, but I want to nail that feeling because something's wrong in the sketch, and I'm not doing that here. So go follow the Instagram. We'll have all the paintings up later this week, and maybe by then I'll have nailed it. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint Talk episode 151. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.